Bonjour tout le monde.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 32 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Public Accounts.
Format pursuant to the standing orders, although I believe everyone is in the room. Conformément à l'article 108.
In accordance with 108 3G of the Standing Order, the committee is undertaking a report of recruitment for the Canadian Armed Forces report of fall 2025 by the Auditor General of Canada, sent to the committee on October 21st, 2025. A point of clarification, Mr. Chair. Yes, just a moment, please. Yes, Mr. Deltel. Yes, Mr. Chair. I'd like to know whether we have any news from the Minister of Finance and to come before testify before the committee as we sent 2 weeks ago. Thank you for the question. To date, no, we have no answer, but we will follow up again today for a response from the Minister of Finance to appear before the committee by summer.
Business we're trying to get sorted out. Now over to our witnesses. From the Office of the Auditor General, Andrew Hayes, Deputy Auditor General, nice to see you here today. And Mohammed Ayashi, Director from the Auditor General Office as well. Good to see you as well. And from the Department of National Defence, Christiane Fox, Deputy Minister, nice to see you back again, along with Lieutenant General Eric Simoneau, Chief Military Personnel, nice to have you back as well. And General Stephen Kelsey, Vice Chief of Defence Staff, Canadian Armed Forces, nice to have you in today as well. I understand there are two opening statements. Mr. Hayes, you'll kick us off for 5 minutes, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee today to discuss a report on recruiting for Canada's military, which was tabled last October. I'd like to begin by recognizing that we are meeting on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. With me today is Mohammed Ayashi, the director who led the audit team. In this audit, we looked at whether the Canadian Armed Forces recruited and trained enough members to meet its operational requirements. The Canadian Armed Forces set a goal of recruiting just over 19,700 new members between 2022 and 2025, but fell short by about 25%. While tens of thousands applied, only 1 in 13 were successfully recruited and made it to basic training. Some applicants were rejected by the forces, but we found that a high number of candidates withdrew or abandoned their applications. The forces did not analyze why this happened during the recruitment process. Without understanding why applicants are dropping out, the forces does not know what changes are needed to increase the number of successful candidates. Furthermore, the IT systems used to support recruitment and training activities contributed to inefficiencies and delays. As these systems were not interconnected, applicants had to provide information more than once, and staff had to manually enter large amounts of data. Les forces ont apporté des changements.
The forces made changes to increase the number of recruits, but these changes were implemented towards the end of our audit period. It was therefore too early to assess their impact on recruitment rates. In the audit, we also examined the demographic data on people recruited by the Canadian Armed Forces. We noted that the forces had strategies and programs to attract a diverse group of Canadian men and women. The forces had exceeded their employment equity objectives for the recruitment of Indigenous people and members of visible minorities, but the representation of women fell short of the targeted objective. We also noted that due to a lack of equipment, of instruction staff, and facilities, the forces did not have sufficient capacity on instruction to reach its recruitment targets. In 2025, temporary instruction staff was hired to train additional cohorts, but according to the forces, this approach is not sustainable. In the absence of a sufficient number of highly qualified recruits, including pilots and arms technicians, the armed forces, the Navy, and the Air Force will have difficulty responding efficiently to threats, emergency situations, and conflicts. Mr. Chair, I will now wrap up my opening comments. We would be happy to answer questions from the members of the committee. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. Next, Ms. Fox for about 5 minutes, please. Okay. Is my microphone working?
Committee members and Deputy Auditor General and Director Ayashi, good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss the Auditor General's report on recruitment in the Canadian Armed Forces. Today I'm joined by my colleagues, the Vice Chief of Defence Staff, Stephen Kelsey, and Lieutenant General Eric Simoneau, Chief of Military Personnel. As this report indicates, the Canadian Armed Forces had set a goal of recruiting over 19,700 new recruits and achieved about 15,000 at the time of the report. We appreciate the time and research the Office of the Auditor General undertook to examine this matter, and we are working diligently to respond. The report makes 6 recommendations, all of which National Defence has agreed to and responded to with a detailed action plan. J'aimerais attirer l'attention sur quelques-unes des constatations du...
I'd like to draw your attention to some of the observations of the report. It was highlighted that D&D has over 8 different IT systems that are not well integrated to manage data on recruitment. Auditors also found that the staff who managed recruitment lacked authority and accountability. There was not enough clear ownership over the recruitment process. Another issue was delay. The Canadian Armed Forces aims for a timeline of between 100 and 150 days, but it often took twice as long to recruit. Over the 3 years that were measured, the median number of days it took for an applicant to be recruited was between 245 and 271 days. The delay was more problematic when it came to recruiting for in-demand roles such as combat engineer, pilot, and aerospace telecommunications and information systems technician. Many of the applicants who specified that they were applying for an in-demand role either failed to stay in touch with recruiters or dropped out of the process. Their reasons for voluntary withdrawal from the process were not documented, as Andrew mentioned.
We don't have data on why people are dropping out, and therefore it is very difficult to have the required information to address. These findings have refocused the defence team. We have committed to applying the lessons and recommendations outlined in this report. Some changes were made during the period covered by the Auditor General's report, and some have been made since. For example, our department made changes to the screening process for permanent residents, significantly increasing recruitment in this population. This was reflected in the report, which showed that over a 6-month period, 763 permanent residents were recruited compared to a 30-month period previously in which only 177 recruitments were achieved. We're also creating one cohesive IT system for recruitment instead of various disconnected platforms. This will mean that we can better track applications through the recruitment process. We will also be updating the electronic forms so that applicants complete them only once, and the information they submit will be transferred automatically to other parts of the recruitment system. We will track our results to refine our approach over time. Nous mettons tout en œuvre non seulement pour...
We are doing everything we can, not only to attract new recruits, but also to maintain contact with them and keep them. If we retain their candidacy, we can more easily understand their reasons and make the necessary adjustments. As you know, the budget for 2025 sets out a historic investment of spending on defense. And National Defense will spend $81 million to rebuild, rearm the Canadian Armed Forces. Canadians deserve to have assurances that this generational investment will offer better ability and offer good value for money. Much of the spending is on staff. The department has taken significant measures to increase recruitment within the Canadian Armed Forces, notably by investing in military housing, by improving access to childcare, and by increasing the salaries and benefits of all serving members. We're seeing positive results. Applications were up nearly 13% in the past fiscal year compared with the previous year.
Increasing awareness about what's required in defending Canada's security and sovereignty, and this is why these changes are more important than ever. Mr. Chair, committee members, at National Defence, we are entrusted with a sacred responsibility to defend Canadians and to preserve and assert our sovereignty. Nous continuerons de prendre des mesures et
We will continue to take measures and make improvements in order to attract the competent candidates that we need.
Auditor General and her office for the detailed insights into this report. They have sharpened our focus as we create a faster and more effective recruitment process to strengthen and grow our Canadian Armed Forces. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fox. We'll now begin our first round of questions, which will consist of 3 members, 6 minutes each. Mr. Bazan, you're going to kick things off for us, I understand. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank our witnesses for joining us today. Thank the Auditor General's Office for the work that you've done on this. We know this morning that Minister McGuinty came out and did some damage control because this report is quite condemning, announced numbers for this last fiscal year. Now, it's still, at the end of the day, 44,000 people recently were successfully applied, but only 7,300 made it into basic training. And there is a lot of ambiguity in the numbers. Like, we don't know the details of this, but over 83% are still not making it in through the forces, although they've gone through the application process. We know that the economy is faltering, that there's been huge job losses under this Liberal government, and of course maybe that's one of the reasons people are signing up to join the forces, to actually have employment. We know that a lot of this is being filled by permanent residents that previously had not. As you mentioned, Deputy Minister Fox, that there was changes to security clearances for PRs. So the question I ask is, despite what the minister tried to do this morning, we're still not getting enough people through. We still are unsure of what the retention number is. And so out of the 7,300 new recruits versus what was the goal, he surpassed it by just over 300. What is the real numbers of the force strength today? And are we on holding our own, or are things still struggling?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the question. As was announced this morning by the Minister, yes, as of March 31st, we are now at 67,800 regular forces. And I think we have seen kind of a year-over-year increase, as was noted this morning. And even if you look back in terms of the enrollments from recruits from April, that's like about April 2024, it's about a 9% increase in recruits. In terms of your specific question around sort of the numbers that get through, what I would say, we look at it more in the context of percentage, so maybe I can use percentages. So in kind of 0 to 1 year, we're seeing 16% people who decide not to pursue or leave at some point from 0 to 1. So we have to get the data as to why this is happening to improve the system to get a better result.
Doing exit surveys on why people are leaving the forces.
We are doing more data than we have, and the kind of launch of our online application system is allowing us more than we did in the past. There still needs to be improvement in that, and we'll kind of continue to modernize over time. But I do want to note that after
bleeding out forces that are kind of that middle management, the ones that are doing the training, making sure that new recruits are getting through in their occupations. I know that's where we've bottlenecked in the past, that we don't have enough, corporals, master corporals or master seamen, actually out there doing the training of those new recruits.
Yes. What I would say to that question, first I would say that the drop-off rate after 1 year is about 8%, and that's actually consistent with what we see in other industries. So we have that data, and we're taking a look at that in more detail. And you raise a very good point. We need to have instructors in order for us to train more people, and so that's why some of the incentives that have been announced around allowances for instructors is proving to be successful in the context of recruiting them to play those roles.
So I'm hearing that at St. Jean right now, where we do all of our basic training, that there is a large number that are either voluntarily withdrawing or have failed to meet the standards. Some of them even on language. Some of the PRs are not functional in either French and or English. So based upon that, we're hearing that there's temporary shelters being built to house them. I thought that all of our forces that or all those that have gone through basic training or are in basic training, whether they voluntarily withdraw or not, that they're paid to go home, not to be stored up in temporary housing like tents. And I'm hearing up to 13 units being built to house those that have not gotten through basic training.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I would say those recruits that are being terminated, the 16% that the Deputy Minister talked about is twofold. It's a voluntary release, for which we do exit survey now, and we understand why. And bottom line for those half of the 16% is just not for them. They wanted to try it, they gave their best shot, and either they voluntarily release or they're being exfilled through a period of probation that we put in place, because as we work diligently to reduce barriers at the entry, we didn't want lower standards. So standards remain.
Or voluntary releasing. You say half of that is voluntary release. How much is based upon medical? How much is based upon mental health? Because all that is happening after they show up at basic training.
So Mr. Chair, half of the releases are owing to medical release. Half of those medical release are mental health. The other half is musculoskeletal. So therefore you have voluntary release, and then you have the medical release, half and half, and the medical release are half and half as well. So that's what we observe. I would say that the platoons that are awaiting training, people that are on those platoons, it's not because they're waiting to be exfilled. It's because we believe that they can be rehabilitated. They are injured, they're hurt, and we're working with them to recourse them on the next serial or 2 serials down the road. So we're trying to gainfully employ them in the meantime. The limiting factor of our recruiting ambitions is the
Employable.
I'm afraid, Mr. President, that is your time. We'll come back to you, I'm sure. Suivant up next. Ms. Yip, you have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, and welcome back again. Why does it matter for Canada to have the right numbers of Canadian Armed Forces to be able to carry out our operations at home and around the world? How does this impact our ability to recruit and retain people in order to carry out different types of operations?
I will start and then maybe turn to the experts, but I would say that we absolutely need to have the skills and expertise in order to assert Canadian sovereignty, in order for us to conduct important operations, missions here and internationally. And so having a group of people with the right skill sets, especially in some of the critical operations, to be able to deliver that is a focus of the department and, of course, of the CAF. And so this is why this $2 billion investment into a lot of the incentives to attract and retain the qualified personnel that we need to conduct these operations is essential. It is quite, significant in the context of, pay adjustments, instructor allowances, environmental allowances. Like, there's a list of incentives that I think are important in recruiting. And then I'll turn to the Vice and Lieutenant General on a perspective from the forces as well.
The shortage of trained personnel, as is fairly evident, is what constrains our ability to operate in and around the world. But to a point Eric made, that it's also constraining our ability to grow and expand. So those master sailors, corporals, master corporals that are the engine of generating growth are the same folks that we need to employ elsewhere. So it's a strategic choice. We could, based on the number of folks that have demonstrated interest in joining the force, we could take them all at once, but it would pull people out of the ready force. It would stop our ability to be present around the world, and in particular here in Canada. So it is a interdependent system, but all the more reason why the growth is important, and General Simoneau is accelerating. So we grew by 2,000 folks last year, the previous year, and almost the same this year.
There are 8 steps from recruitment to being a trained officer, and it's been noted that there's been a need to modernize the recruitment process, one of the recommendations. What is being done? Because right now there's pre-apply, apply, process, offer, enroll, basic training, occupational training, train Canadian Armed Forces member. It seems to be a long time in terms of when they first demonstrate their interest.
First, I would say what is being done, I would point to in the recruitment process, we've launched a new kind of portal called This Is For You. And it allows an applicant to virtually experience what it is to be in the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. And that is, in my view, an important part of exposing someone to what those careers could offer. And then following on that, we are absolutely modernizing our online system, because we have to have, user-friendly processes for people to submit their applications. It has to be modern in the context of their ability to do it from their smartphone, going through those steps. And so that digital experience is important as they navigate. And then on the back end of that, we need to have sort of a case management system that takes kind of a tell me once approach. So you come in through the portal, and there's been some work around the basic training list across all organizations between Army, Navy, and Air Force to make determinations about where people are at, making sure that the system is talking to each other. So we moved from a system that was quite separated and unique to a more integrated sort of intake, so that we can track and we know where people are at in their training. We know kind of what their next steps are. So there's more work to be done, but this digital approach will help us in addressing some of the challenges that have been raised through the AG report. And because of the question around digital, I would also say that an important component is also looking at how digital can help us in training. We have really important in-person training that has to take place, but if we can do some of that online, then we can maximize some of the efforts in the in-person while dealing with some of the other pieces remotely, which can then have a greater throughput for our applicants and our recruitment system to move more people through the process and give them that really valuable experience they need.
Is AI being used to streamline the applicant process, to shorten the time?
It is. There's an automation, and I think we'll have to evolve the AI into further sort of as we roll out this system, like we've rolled out kind of version 1. But as we indicated in our management action plan, we will continuously update with the goal of completion in March of 2028, which would have sort of an integrated data management that would benefit from AI tools built into it.
The strategies used to attract a more diverse and inclusive group of Canadians to the Canadian Armed Forces?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. In terms of diversity, I'm very proud to report that we did really great, actually, last year. We onboarded, in terms of racialized people, 33.7% of our strategic intake of last year was of a target of 12%. So this is in large part thanks to the permanent resident line of effort that we're bringing inside the forces, 1,400 of them over the last year, which is the greatest number we've ever had. And this is very helpful for us to face the volatility, the complexity of the world that we already have today, but that certainly of tomorrow. We need diversity of thoughts. We need people to not group think on issues, and therefore onboarding that diversity is really important to us, and we are delivering on it. In terms of Indigenous, which also talks to diversity, but so important to us, we are expanding our recruiting centers footprint. For example, as we speak now, we don't have a recruiting center in Yellowknife. That doesn't make sense. So we will have one. We're moving ahead with this. Saskatoon, same thing. We're getting closer to where we could have rangers as well. So Port-au-Prince and the like. So we have an expansion. We only have 21 recruiting centers across Canada. We want to add 18, and they all have in common that we're going to bring ourselves closer to communities.
Thank you. That is your time, Monsieur. Suivant, c'est Monsieur Lemire pour 6 minutes.
Next, Mr. Lemire for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Fox, thank you once again for joining us this week. It's not the first audit that has raised recruitment difficulties at the Canadian Armed Forces. I'm thinking of that on the CF-35s, in which the Office of the Auditor General raised a shortage of pilots and technicians following a report in 2018, which also raised the possibility of shortcomings on that side. What have we learned from the action plan of the 2018 recommendation that from the 2018 report that didn't bear fruit? Thank you for the question. I would say, well, we drew lessons from the 2018 report and we made an action plan, but I think there are things that are being proposed today with the funding we've received that we were not able to propose at the time at the first report by the Auditor General, the 2018 report that you mentioned. We learned lessons. We corrected course for pilots and maintenance staff for aircraft. There were definitely changes made, but I think that compensation and benefits that were proposed in the announcements made in the last year have made it so that we can address some of the shortcomings that we had a hard time addressing in terms of talent retention and recruitment, rather. I imagine it's a coincidence. I don't know whether it's a coincidence or not, but this morning Radio Canada announced that the recruitment objectives, achieved a peak, a 30-year peak, and if so, I think that's a good communications win. But we are still in a world context in which military pressure is very high. Does that have an impact on people's applications to join the Canadian Armed Forces? The fact that countries are arming themselves and no government wants to say that I'm spending this money for nothing. Do you think that's spurring people to join the Canadian Armed Forces? I'll answer that question, Mr. Chair. Regardless of the reason why people want to join the CAF, we welcome them with open arms. We will welcome them, whether it's the economic situation, our relationship with our partnership to the South, whether it's the new compensation and benefits envelope that was announced on August 8th last year that we are implementing throughout the year. There are many reasons to explain this, but yes, we had 697 we were targeting civilians, 7,310 people. What's difficult to understand is that we have a database. We have 40,000 applicants. We verified their ages and their citizenship and education. as was said earlier, we could do that all in one go if we had the training ability, and that is really what's limiting us currently. It is, every year we make a strategic intake plan, and it's based on our capacity that we can train, and we need additional investments because we are setting a very ambitious objective of some 8,200 new applicants in the Canadian Armed Forces and the regular forces alone. And to get there, we don't have any choice but to work on our basic training system. To give you a mental picture, those who've already gone to Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu, the big structure that you have has some, we need to do it some 3,000 people, and we need to do half of that at Borden to achieve. For 8,000, we'll make digital tweaks. We'll do virtual onboarding, so there is a week of paper forms that they have to fill out, and we'll focus on basic training, and that will free up more capacity. But we also need to rebuild and purchase equipment to achieve our objective. Thank you for your answer. Over 100,000 candidates voluntarily withdrew their candidacy between April 1st and March 31st, 2025. That's over half. What are the reasons behind this withdrawal, and can we draw links between the fact that more of the processes are online and that at the end of the day there's no follow-up, and that can be demotivating? Mr. Chair, that's why we greatly appreciate the report by the Auditor General, because the recruitment system was under budgeted. We didn't have enough resources, and the number of software systems that we had that were not communicating with each other, it was a patchwork approach, and that is what happens when we don't have sustainable, predictable funding, which we think we have now and we received this year. So we're able to create digital tools that can give us an accurate overall picture. We didn't have a good portrait. What we had was a website that had an Apply Now button, and when people were seeking out information, when the Auditor General conducted her analysis, she looked at the number of clicks, and it was often people who were interested but not necessarily applicants. They were people who wanted to have information, and they had to click on the button. And now we have a portal that does that job, and we track them much better and where they are in the process. But it's not without fault. We went from 275 days to 134 days, and we'd like to bring that down to 30 days, because someone who's in the pipeline and who's waiting, well, there's nothing worse than that, and we don't know where they are in the system. And there's in the next system, we're investing a lot more in the digitization. Thank you. Our second round, 5 people. Mr. Deltel, you'll kick us off with 5 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be sharing my time with my honourable colleague, Mr. Couric. Colleagues, good morning. Welcome to our witnesses. Welcome. We met last week, and I salute General Kelsey, who has served his country very well for 41 years now. Thank you for your service to our country. Now, what comes out of this report is learning that some 130,000 people left the process. That's about 50%. General, earlier you said that there are a lot of mechanical problems for identifying people. But how is it that there are so many people, 50% of people, are not making the right choice?
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, what I would say is that those 103,000 people were people who were certainly interested because they clicked on the website, but they're not necessarily applicants who submitted an application. And now through the portal, we are using a tool ACE-OS, which is age, citizenship, and education. And that means they're sharing documents with us, and they're really serious about starting the application process. 2 years ago, we were in that database, we had about 11,000. We're up to, last year we were at 21,000, and this year we're at 44,000. So these are real serious applicants. In the report, they talk about performance targets, and it was 1.8%. And then it went to 1.13, and they said it should be between 100 and 150 days. How during the last 10 years was our Army not able to overcome the challenges that it was facing?
Merci pour la
Thank you for the question. I think that an important answer is the funding that was given to attract and ensure the retention of the Canadian Armed Forces. And it's true that the process was long. As the General said, now we are down to 135 days compared to what was highlighted in the report. That's an improvement, and we'll continue to improve the process, including with more digitized processes to streamline the application process. Go ahead, it's your time.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. So, in February, the Minister of Immigration announced the new express entry category for foreign military applicants to be invited to apply for permanent residence. There's 800 cases of study permits were flagged as having fraudulent documents, but the IRCC didn't follow up on any of those cases. Are you concerned about this military express entry program, since the Auditor General found that they aren't acting on integrity concerns, even though they're aware it exists?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. The express entry allows us to identify talent and draw from permanent residency. And there's kind of a two-step process in the security clearance. So there would be what the Immigration Department would manage, and then there's a secondary step that we would manage at the Department of Defense. So we do not rely exclusively on the immigration process.
Thank you for that answer. Up to $1,500 reduction for some out-of-country deployments. Now, that was announced, I think it was last week. Now, these are the men and women that are deployed. They're in active duty or peacekeeping or whatever they're involved with outside of Canadian borders. I have a hard time with that. So my question is how will this affect recruitment? What message does that say?
Thank you for the question. So the post index, which is the forward post index that you refer to, is set by the Treasury Board, and it's delivered by StatsCan, where they do reviews of the economic context. It compares the cost to Ottawa in the context of it compares it against Ottawa, I should say. And so the post-living allowance is based on the cost of living of a particular location. And we did note that over the last year, there was almost a backlog of review processes in terms of determining what that cost was. So now it will be done on an annual basis, and therefore we will have more predictability. But we will have to constantly look at cost of living pressures, the economic context, because we do want to maintain our attraction and recruitment strategies, and we have to do that on an ongoing basis. So I think the incentives help address some of that, but it is important to note that this is not just the military, it is about all foreign postings for the Government of Canada.
Thank you. That is your time, but I know we're coming back to you very soon, Mr. Couric. Mr. McKinnon, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. What I think I'm hearing is that the lack of instruction resources is a major limitation. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is correct. The limiting factor for to grow the CAF faster is the training system.
If we had more instruction resources, we could increase. That alone would help us to increase our rates of growth.
Mr. Chair, we can always throw more resources. I would not say that alone. I would say we also need to digitalize so that we don't drop applicants. We're still no perfect in terms of time to process, although we're well within the limits that the Auditor General told us we should be, which was between 120 and 150 days for an application. We're at 134. Our goal is really 30 days. So there's that at the front end that we need to keep improving on. But then, yes, the capacity, which talks to infrastructure, digitalization, and equipment.
So let's focus a little bit still on instruction resources. What can we do to improve those, to increase them? Is this a problem with retention? Are we having trouble retaining the personnel that need to conduct these instruction exercises?
Thank you for that question. Mr. Chair, I think I would say absolutely the instructor focus is key in order to have more people go through the training and then be able to serve. And so the instructor allowance looks at members who are posted or posted to designated instructor units. So we've got an allowance for that. We've got instructor allowances for the Canadian Forces Leadership and Recruit School, as well as instructors at all of our establishments. And therefore, focusing on ensuring we have enough instructors allows us to proceed with more training. But we also have to look at, and what the military has done is even increasing training lines. So for instance, at Borden, at one point we had 2 training lines. Now we have 3. By the fall, we hope to have 4. So it's a modernization of the efforts on the training, and then it's also about making sure that we've got the instructors required to deliver that training.
So you're saying that there are incentives in place now to encourage instructors to be instructors and to remain in the forces? Yes?
Yes, correct.
Okay. What do you mean by training line? I don't understand that.
So, Mr. Chair, a training line is it's a team that will provide basic training, and basic training takes 8 weeks to render. So therefore, we make them back to back to back, and that's a training line across 1 year. What we intend to do, for example, in Borden, we want to increase this to an overall training capacity of one. It translates, the 4 lines translate in 1,000 trainee over that same year. So 250 per line across the year, so 1,000 in the upcoming year is our goal. But we want to go beyond this, so that again talks to building infrastructure and to bring personnel and equipment.
So with more training lines, we're training more people on a concurrent basis, right?
That's correct, solving our capacity issues.
But again, I want to go back to retention. Are we having problems with qualified instructors dropping out of the forces?
Mr. Chair, we're not losing instructors from the forces. However, we had problem to attract the instructors to the schools, to the basic schools, because they needed to surrender their field or their C allowance to come and instruct. So therefore, that was a major dissatisfier and a de-incentivizing to go to our schools. So now we put the allowance, which is pretty much on par with what they would be earning by being in the field or at sea. So there's no de-incentives to come and instruct. So therefore, we have access to a bigger pool of instructors.
Really? So are there any particular gaps in our ability to instruct any particular professions or roles that need to be better staffed in order to do that?
Okay. Mr. Chair, I'll continue on this one. So we have 97 occupations. So aside from basic, who everybody goes to the same officer or non-commissioned member basic training, afterwards it fans out to 97 different. So they're all different. They all have their own path. And but in general, I would coin it that you may have heard of our missing medal. Missing medal are the middle ranks in the non-commissioned member and in the officers. They're the ones that do instruct, but also, as the VCDS advice said earlier, they're the ones that we deployed, that we ask that they be the advisors to other partnering nations. So they're on high demand. So those is where we focus the benefits and our attention on, because and it's based on their capacity as well as infrastructure. That we derive our strategic intake plan for every year, because we do have access to 44,000 people right now. So we need to bring them in at a rate that we can actually train them right up to operational function point.
Okay, great.
Thank you. That's your time. Thank you, Mr. McKinnon. Suivant encore une fois, c'est M. Lemire pour 2 minutes 30 secondes, s'il vous plaît.
Next, Mr. Lemire. According to data from the Royal Canadian Navy, only a certain percentage of the body is bilingual. The Royal Canadian Navy is having a hard time attracting Francophone recruits. We would need to create a naval base in a Francophone area. There is no current naval base in Quebec. And it would be necessary to, do you think, Madame Fox, that is something that could be interesting? Thank you for the question. First of all, perhaps to give you an overview of Francophone recruitment in the recent fiscal year, we're now up to 22.3% across the forces. But yes, for the Navy, it is important that we look at across Canada, where are the military bases, what is the bilingualism rate throughout the armed forces. But yes, we are always looking at ways to maximize our impact and attract Francophones, so it's not a question of yes or no, but these are considerations that we certainly look at. In 2021, Raymond Théberge said it was difficult for members of the Canadian Armed Forces to work in French. General Simoneau last week said that the life of a Francophone soldier is not just in Quebec, and it is difficult for Francophones perhaps to have access to services in French outside of Canada, elsewhere in Canada rather. Do you think it is easier for an Anglophone soldier to have access to services within Quebec as compared to the contrary? Mr. Chair, what I would say to that question is that we really want to be served in our mother tongue. That's why the modernization of official languages and the new regulations will be implemented rigorously. It's different for Francophone and Anglophone. For Francophones, are often in very technical fields or who interact with partners in the Five Eyes in the U.S. and in the UK, there's no choice but to learn very early in our career how to interact in English. And I was sent to a language school, and I had a technical vocabulary course in Moose Jaw before I was sent I was given all the tools I needed before I had to do this. For an Anglophone, it's easier for them at the beginning of their career because they're immersed in their primary language. The work that they do is often in the language of the Five Eyes, which is English. But the challenge comes up later in their career because to climb the ranks, they need to have their second official language. And so they're sent to language courses. And in my opinion, sometimes it's too late. I think it should be done earlier, and they should be exposed to their second official language earlier in their careers. We talk about people who are waiting for basic training, and what do? We send them to units where they learn how to do their job. Perhaps they should be sent to language school to learn language at a younger age when their brains are more malleable, and that could be part of their basic training. And we're looking at that seriously. For all of these reasons, I would say that the experience of a Francophone and an Anglophone is different. But to reassure you about the French fact, the senior ranks of the Canadian Armed Forces are 34% are Francophones. That's the top of the pyramid. So in the Canadian Armed Forces, we have The Deputy Minister said we recruited 22.3% this year. We are 24% Francophones in the Canadian Armed Forces, which is higher than in our weight in the Canadian population, which is 21%. So, thank you once again. And thank you, sir.
Back to Mr. Keurig for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. So I find it extremely concerning that the Auditor General said that, quote, this could affect the Army, Navy, and the Air Force ability to respond to threats, emergencies, or conflicts and accomplish their missions, unquote. So over the last 10 years, the Liberals have neglected our national defense, and it's clear by the Auditor General's report that they let it get out of control. So how is it that nearly after a decade of this Liberal governance, the recruitment system has become so inefficient that it turns away like the overwhelming majority of willing Canadians?
So thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question. We have to focus our efforts on recruitment and retention. There is no doubt it is essential, and we have to make that process appropriate and responsive to people who apply. And so these investments, both in terms of the digital portal, the investments into infrastructure to have the right infrastructure in place, are key in our ability to do that successfully. And I think that we saw from the report the impacts that had, and we're working towards it. And to your point around sort of the geopolitical context and our ability to respond, we have to be able to respond. We have to take part in operations both domestically and abroad in order to contribute to our sovereignty, to global security. And I think the more people we have to do that, the better equipped we are as a country.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with your answer. But then we see things like today where obviously there was going to be this committee today, and we see a report come out, and it only states how many people have signed up, and yet we don't have the data on why they're leaving, how many are dropping off, to the PR stuff. So I look at this as like this report that came out today is a bit of a way to negate what we're doing here today and to escape some of these tough questions. Where are we on this? Where are we on that data capturing? Because I think that's the essence of we need to know why Canadians are falling off.
So thank you very much for the question. So we launched the online portal that will give us better data. That needs to improve, so it's going to be consistent improvement. I think June is the next kind of 2.0 version of that portal. It will give us that data to allow us to better understand why people are dropping off. And we have been doing some work to do both kind of, are they compensation drivers to this decision? Is it non-compensation? If it's non-compensation, then what is that? And so this is something that we're going to have to first have the ability to collect that data, then assess it using that kind of evidence base to inform the decisions we will make. So the answer is we are seized with this because it is a gap if we don't know why people are leaving. So we have reinstituted exit interviews. We need to do that formally into a system, and then we need to drive our communications. We need to drive our recruitment based on what we hear.
I'll concede the rest of my time to my colleague, Mr. Deltel.
Thank you very much. I'd like to talk about First Nations. In my writing, I'm very proud to say that recruitment during the Second World War, the Indigenous soldiers paid us a great service by communicating in their Indigenous languages. We owe a lot to the First Nations, and I think that the Canadian Armed Forces wins when it highlights these accomplishments. Now today, concerning the target on recruitment, where are we and what can be done to improve it? Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Great news again. It's very good news. Last year we recruited 3.4% of First Nations candidates. Our objective was 3.5%, so we fell just a bit shy. But it is in large part why we are developing closer ties with First Nations across Canada, including in Quebec. We want to open a recruitment center in Yellowknife in Saskatoon, and what all of these proposed recruitment centers bring to the table is that they bring us closer to First Nations communities. You said earlier that Yellowknife did not have a recruitment center. Did I understand that correctly? If so, there are First Nations people, so it seems like we're lagging on this. We are moving as quickly as we can, Mr. Chair. The plan is that we will be opening it this year. And in recent years, there was no recruitment center? No. I would have to check. I can't say that we've never had one, but we didn't have one until a recent past. In the recent past, rather. But I don't have the answer to that. Thank you very much, Mr. Deltel.
For 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks to our officials for attending today. I want to thank the Auditor General, as always, for their report, which exposes some gaps and some definite room for improvement. I would confidently say that we seem to be moving in the right direction now, so that's definitely good news. I do want to speak specifically to Exhibit number 3 in the Auditor General's report, which highlights different targets over the past few years. And something that just jumped out at me, this covers the years of 2022, 23, and 24, and the target for recruitment was 1 in 8 for several of those years. Those targets were not met, and in 2022 we had recruiting at 1 in 11. 2023 it was 1 in 16. For 2024 and 2025 the target was met. We had 1 in 12, but it looked like the target had actually changed. So I'm just wondering why that 2024-2025 target was moved.
Mr. Chair, this is the 77,000 that the Auditor General could speak more about, but the number of clicks on Apply Now, they were not necessarily all serious applicants. They were people interested in joining the Canadian Armed Forces because they were seeking information. They hit the Apply Now button, which counted for 1. Just as in terms of more information, if you click twice, that would have been reported as 2 clicks, as 2 applicants. So it was very problematic. This is why we generated the online applicant portal that we then go back and forth on the preliminary check on age, citizenship, and education, the age check, telling us that this is a real applicant. And now we have 44,000 of them, and we just onboarded in the Canadian Armed Forces 7,310. So that's a 1-to-7 ratio. The 77,000, that was at the time that we were only intaking 3,000, so that's a 13-to-1 ratio. But I'm just struggling with the 77,000 because I right now would not consider them as serious applicant, but in those days when the Auditor General team was doing the analysis, they had no choice. They had nothing else to base their study on because we didn't have the online applicant portal. So this is why I truly value the Auditor General's report, because they pointed us towards digitalization, towards reduction in application, which we are implementing, and now we're seeing the better ratios, which is 7-to-1. And I would compare it to our Five Eyes partner. Except for the United States, all the other ones are in the 8-to-1 ratio, so we're actually doing really well. The U.S. simply has a different system in place.
Okay, good news. Thank you for that. I also want to ask about the removal of the aptitude test. I noted in the Auditor General's report that one of the changes that was made was the removal of this Canadian Forces aptitude test, and from what I understand, it evaluated verbal, spatial, and problem-solving skills. Did something replace that test?
Mr. Chair, yes. The answer is yes. We have what we call the Raven test, which is not the end, the final solution. We want to do a cognitive test that we're implementing, so we're working with service providers right now to define exactly how it's going to look like. Ideally off the shelf, easy to acquire, fast. The downside of the Canadian Forces aptitude test was that it was honestly was scaring people away People saw it as a huge barriers, probably more than what it was really about. But still, it was negatively perceived. So we just removed it. We kept it only downstream in certain occupations that we needed to select, that we had no difficulties to recruit into. I would go with pilot, for example. We kept it there for them, but downstream, not at the recruiting stage.
Okay, so would it be a fair comment to say that Canadians can remain confident that the applicants or the recruits that are actually making it through to the final stages are, in fact, meeting aptitude requirements?
Yes, absolutely. And what I would add too is, as part of our recruitment efforts and modernizing, we made some changes as well to kind of the medical evaluations to allow people to take part in basic training in the context of a further evaluation, whether that would be asthma or other types of conditions, and then looking at potential flexibilities around what occupations those people could take on following basic training if in fact the condition was deemed to be less appropriate for one workforce, whereas in the past we probably would have made just a blanket decision. So we're trying to introduce flexibilities in the system and not delay people's participation in the basic training as we do that.
Thank you very much. A question maybe for anyone on the panel, really. I want to point out how I understand audits to be, particularly this one is focused on policy implementation, right? Performance indicators and program management, which are all important. But I regularly make a habit of asking about workplace culture as well, and the way things are done in a particular department or an agency due to localized values and different conventions that develop in those spaces, which can sometimes be a little bit isolated or siloed. Did your audit, and I'll direct this to Mr. Hayes, did your audit detect any workplace or management culture that either positively or negatively impacted recruitment performance?
Thank you very much. The answer to that question is that we looked at it from the perspective of why people might be reluctant to stay in the process, or, for example, in the case of some individuals who left after a couple of years of being in the forces, that did emerge as one of the reasons why, after 4 years of reaching occupational functional point, which is when they are fully trained, members left because of either training delays, difficulty adapting to military culture, or dissatisfaction with their occupations. So if you're looking for that in the report, it's at paragraph 22. And I think to answer your question, it will happen that some people are not satisfied in a particular workplace for a number of reasons. What's important is identifying those reasons and addressing them where they can be addressed for retention purposes.
Thank you. That is the time. I did notice the lights are flashing. I've sent a note to find out what's going on. We're just going to continue for now until we hear otherwise from the whips or the lobby. Beginning our third round now, which will consist of 5 members with various times. Mr. Stevenson, you'll kick us off for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. First question tweaked a bit of my interest. General Semino said something, and I just wanted to clarify. Are the Rangers now included in the umbrella of the military for both their numbers and their spending?
We have always included them as part of our numbers. They're funded through the Army. The junior Rangers are actually funded through our organization, but the recruiting is a distinct process, community-led, and not part of this recruiting.
Okay, I'm just curious because I actually have a small segment of Rangers in my North End in Grand Cache, so I was just curious on that. Earlier through this process, they were talking about there was 8 different systems where they were electronically there, and now they're looking at improving their systems wide. Can you tell me was this due to kind of the 10 years of lack of funding and know where your funding was? Was this because of priorities that you chose not to upgrade the electronic systems previously, or is it because now the Auditor General said that you must work together and get these things going, and so now it's become a priority?
I would say that, and thank you for the question, Mr. Chair, I would say it is a priority for us, and it was a gap. And it is a gap that the systems didn't talk to each other, and therefore the recruiting experience of an individual.
Why?
I think choices were made around where do you make your fund, where do you spend your money?
Okay.
And I think this helped, yeah.
Okay. And this may be for either one of the generals. You guys have talked about, and actually General Seminole had mentioned that they had talked about the 33% of the recruits now are looking at basically DEI requirements. Can you tell me, were those requirements internally created, or were they forced basically from the Liberal government saying all governments should be looking at this to have all staff to have different recruits?
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned earlier, we do value diversity. I firmly believe that the volatility, the uncertainty, the complexity of the world that we're into right now and that we'll have, it's going to just worsen as we move forward. Our Chief of Defense Staff is very serious about when she looks at the future. That's why she gave us the ambitious target to meet the 71,500 number sooner than what Strong, Secure, Engaged told us, which was by 2032. She told us by 2029. So she wants us to meet those numbers, and we will. So part of it.
Where I'm going with this is that, for me, I don't really care gender, race, or anything, as long as that the soldier that is protecting their country is capable of doing those things. And I'm just curious if who's making the decisions, if they're being impressed upon the military to make their hiring checks, or maybe specifically, are you being restricted if, I'm just throwing a number out there, if 95% of the recruits came through as white males, and you're more pushed to meet those DEI requirements, is that going to restrict us from having the best of the best versus filling these other requirements first?
Mr. Chair, there's only one answer to this, is there's one standard, and we're upholding the standard. So we did exceed 34% almost on a target of 12%. So the reason we went above target is because they were the right individuals to onboard in the Canadian Armed Forces. We are selecting. It is a selection process. We have a pool of 44,000 to draw from as we speak, and that pool keeps evolving by the day, like it fluctuates. But so we have a 7-to-1 ratio to pick from, and we're picking the best talent we can from that pool.
Okay. How much time do you have?
You got time for one more. Go ahead.
Okay. In your process, in the audit, there was some discussion earlier about temporary instructors that were taken on to increase capacity. But this approach doesn't sound like it's sustainable. My concern is that we're fixing short-term fixes to manage long-term structural problems. From your perspective, what structural changes will need to ensure that the forces are actually sustaining those training the personnel?
Thank you, Chair. The use of temporary instructors is to accelerate change. Concurrent with that, the structural changes, so the growth of the recruiting system is happening. Additional positions are added to Borden and Saint Jean. The challenge we face, as was alluded in the question, is that as we create new structure and draw talent in, these master sailors, young women and men, to teach, and we incentivize them through instructor pay, those are the same folks that are needed in other schoolhouses to grow the back end of this training system. So once General Seminole is done, they go to the 97 trade schools and get qualified and become employable. So it really is a strategic choice, but we are absolutely looking at it systemically. They are interdependent conditions, but it's infrastructure, it's digital enablement, it's material, uniforms, rifles, and it's dollars to conduct training. We're looking at the whole, and the OIG report reminded us of the right approach.
Thank you. Mr. Stevenson. Turning now to Mr. Osborne for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple of questions. In terms of the median number of days being between 245 and 271, it was said earlier that that has dropped to about 150. What measures were put in place? If you can expand on the measures that were put in place to bring about that improvement.
Start, and maybe my colleague will jump in. So based on our Q4 data, it's right now the median number is about 134. So we've made we aim to be between 100 and 150, but as was said, we're trying to accelerate that even more. I think part of the reason why we saw such improvement is the online capabilities and the digitization of the experience, which allowed us to intake more application forms, have systems in place to receive, and then work between all across the organization to identify where people were at in their journey. And I think the more data you have on that, then you accelerate your process. You get people into basic training faster. You get people into then that specialized training even faster after that. So as we improve our systems and as we streamline, which we'll still need to do, we're not where we want to be, we hope to see that continuously improve and that number go down, because that waiting period as people are expecting an answer or waiting for their next information, it is important that we don't lose people in that moment, and that there are we don't rely just on humans, but flagged systems that generate action and responsiveness. So we are seeing improvement in that. We will continue to make those investments into modernizing the system to see even more.
The AG report determined that 54% of applicants either withdrew voluntarily or did not respond to outreach after 60 days. Can you expand on what you're doing to improve those numbers to ensure that people who apply get more attention, I guess, from the Canadian Armed Forces to ensure that they're engaged and remain in the process?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I would say that part of our challenge at the front end was actually determining what the right numbers were. Were people applying? Were people visiting the website? What was the intention? And I think now that we can improve the systems, we will actually know how many people are actually applying versus general interest to make their decision. If they're visiting twice, making sure that we're not counting them twice. So I think we need to clean up the numbers, clean up the data through a modernized system in order to be able to be then positioned to look at what that data is telling us and then pivot if we need to. So the improvements that we've made to the system have made that we have more granular data. We need to do even better to have a very good understanding and a system in place. We've dedicated resources to this in order not just in digital, but in people to track these things and make sure that people don't get lost in the process. But I do believe that this is a first step to get to better results, and we will need to continuously improve that. And a case management system that is client-focused and responsive to client needs, I think, is exactly what will help us retain those people that show a genuine interest. And I think I noted it earlier, but I think that some of the approaches that the military has taken in terms of showcasing what joining the Army, Navy, or Air Force can look like in a very digital way, in a very user-friendly way. You can navigate your way through what an experience on the battlefield looks like, and you can navigate your way through various experiences. Is just a way to reach people to gain that interest, and I think it shows a connectedness to try to reach Canadians.
The AG survey report also determined that only about 16% of applicants were successfully recruited. There were issues with communication by recruiters, the documents that were submitted by applicants, and applicant inactivity. So we've touched on that a little bit. With the improvements in the computer systems, the ability to intercommunicate, the ability for applicants, their application
to be more streamlined through the system as opposed to having to be manually entered later. Can you expand on the differences, the improvements that have taken place, and the impact that it's having on applicants? Also, I guess, just to touch on, the exit surveys, having a better understanding of those who do drop out, why they drop out, and how we can make improvements to prevent that.
Thank you. Chair, I think you've outlined exactly some of the considerations that we need to take on and are reflecting on at CAF D&D. In the context of data, the modernization of the systems gets us better access to data. And if we can do exit interviews to get a real determining, an evidence-based data sets to tell us why people are leaving. What is the driver to stay? What is the driver not to join? And if we better understand that, then we can sort of think about how do we tailor the recruitment efforts, how do we tailor the training to make sure that we retain those individuals. So I think it is about looking at the data. It is about getting information from the individuals that we are recruiting, better understanding that information, and then putting in place systems to address it, whether it be if it's a culture piece or a training piece. So it's part of a broader approach that we are taking in terms of recruitment and retention.
Very quickly.
Okay. Very
No
quickly,
preamble.
I know that there were 3 or 4 AG reports over the previous years regarding recruitment and so on. Can you expand on the impact that the increased investment by the new government is having? We know that the new computer systems increased pay, but the difference that it's making to the Canadian Armed Forces in terms of being able to recruit and retain.
Thank you. I would say that we have to look at, as you noted, the systems of recruitment and retention, but it's the taking a step back and looking at the broader investments. So it's compensation, it's childcare, it's housing, it's having the military equipment that people want to train on, it's having kind of the capabilities to retain our skilled individuals as part of the armed forces. And so it's the totality of the investments that allow us to prioritize, be very strategic about where we invest, but there is more money to address some of these problems that may have been present in previous AG reports that we can then take a look at in the context of our action plan and the current funding that we have.
Thank you, Mr. Charbonnet. Mr. Lemire, je vais vous donner.
Mr. Lemire, I'll give you 4 minutes because I think that we'll be wrapping up after this round. Same thing for Mr. Bazan. I'll give you a bit more time. And then after that, we'll turn to your motion when the witnesses have been released. So 4 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to come back to my colleagues' comments about Indigenous recruitment, and it's in Abitibi-Témiscamingue. We had a recruitment center that was responsible for increasing recruitment of Indigenous candidates, both in Abitibi-Témiscamingue and in northern Quebec. And my brother was in charge of the recruitment center. So in 2008, over 100 people were part of the detachment in Rouyn-Noranda at the local regiment. It was a source of local pride, and the heritage was important in our region and elsewhere. And a military presence is part of one of the sources of pride. However, since the mid-2010s, first, the Canadian Armed Forces closed the recruitment center in Rouyn-Noranda, and then we lost our status as an independent unit due to cuts in the regular armed forces, and that really reduced the mobilization and size of staff at the recruitment. And we see it in the dynamism of activities like Remembrance Day or other events. And those who remain active do so for the right reasons, but for obvious reasons, I think that military presence has lost some of its vigor. In the current context, you responded that there would be 18 places targeted in Canada to establish recruitment centres. I think that Abitibi-Témiscamingue will show its proof and it's a black hole in the center of Canada that could be addressed for a number of issues, including military recruitment. Is Abitibi-Témiscamingue part of one of the centres that you are currently targeting? The answer is yes, Mr. Chair. Great news. I am very pleased to hear it. And I will be pleased to discuss this further with you. We spoke last week because it will have an impact, an enormous impact, and I would invite you to reflect on the remote regions. Thank you for that. One thing that comes out of the Auditor General's report is that security audits have gone from 20,000 to 23,000 for the period covered by the audit. What factors worsened this backlog? Thank you. Mr. Chair, I would say that in part it was the resources allocated to the work, so we added more resources to facilitate the process. And I would also say that there have been systematic improvements in IT to allow for security screening. That's essential. And we must do so in reasonable timelines, and we have allocated more resources to do so. Is there more? You said, was security filtering simplified? You talked about improved IT processes, because that could result in risks, couldn't it? The rigor is still there. It's the paper process. The resources given to go through files. So we give in more resource to the staff. We don't reduce the time, but we're just adding people. I'm glad to hear that in a federal department. In the report on the RCMP, the Auditor General's report indicated that training a police service costs a certain amount. What's the average cost of training a member of the Canadian Armed Forces? I could give you 87 different answers because there are 97 different categories. It's in the millions for a pilot, and it's much less for other types of trades where there's less learning involved. But what I can reassure you is that the training is high quality, and we are ensuring that we have the best equipment possible. It is a good time for joining the Canadian Armed Forces right now. We have 97 different careers, different occupations, and they are all well equipped, and they'll have good training and missions that make a difference every day to Canadians. Thank you very much. I studied political science, and I understood that I haven't cost the system much, but Mr. Lemire, thank you.
For 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question's to the Office of the Auditor General. In your report, you talked about there's about 6,100 spaces for basic training. Is that correct? They'll turn it on for you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that's correct.
And you said that we were only operating at 80% capacity during the time of your review, and that was largely due to the lack of instructors. Is that also correct? Kind of on page 13 of the report.
That's right, yes. There were 534 positions, but only 429 people staffing those positions. So there is a gap in terms of the resources, the positions to be filled.
Okay, so on top of having that personnel shortage, of having that middle management that can go in there and do basic training, there is also a shortage of equipment. What type of equipment were you referring to in your report in paragraph 30? So
that type of equipment will be the needs of the basic training program. In terms of specifics, I will turn to the representatives from the forces to address that. I will say that equipment and procurement becomes an issue in a number of our audits. We've talked about it in other audit reports, and we will be talking about it in future audit reports.
Okay, thank you. So then go to our national defense team. So what are we currently sitting at? Is it still 6,100 is the capacity of our basic training facilities on an annual basis, or at a one-time level? And if not, where are we going with it?
Mr. Chair, do you mean in terms of equipment?
Well, the Auditor General said that the total capacity is 6,100 recruits, and now you're saying that we trained this year 7,300. So if we're training above and beyond what the facilities are providing, what equipment that we have, how are you doing it? Are we just signing people up and throwing them through, or are they actually getting the proper training that we need?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we're in a difficult situation where we need to acquire more equipment. We need to put national contracting mechanism in place. I'll use a couple examples, the uniforms and the rucksacks. So the creative solutions that we came up with is that recruit, once they terminate their basic training, they have to return their kit to the supply to be reissued to the next set of recruits in order to move. This is less than ideal because, especially with sized equipment, you want to size the recruits once and they keep their equipment throughout their careers, especially if they are in the Army, and they will get to rely on that equipment in the future. So and this is why I always say that we need to digitalize infrastructure, resource with staffing and equipment. The equipment line of effort is really important to address those issues.
During the time of the AJ report, the total shortage in the Red Force Reserve Force was 12,785 people. I know that when General Eyre was still Chief of Defense Staff, he made the comment that at that point in time we were around 16,000 personnel short, but there was also over 10,000 members of the Canadian Armed Forces who were undertrained and undeployable. What is that number at today? How many have gone through basic training but haven't received the training they need in their occupations to make them effective members of the Canadian Armed Forces?
Mr. Chair, the answer to this is called the basic training list. It's everybody that is in the training pipe short of operational functional point that they can be then deployed. And the number orbits, as we speak, around 12,000. This number will increase in the years to come simply because we're growing the CAF. So as we want to grow the CAF, we'll need to manage. And this is where we addressed the front end, which was a recruiting and a basic training. Now we need to go basic to operational training because it fans out to Army, Navy, Air Force, Special Forces, and Joint Forces Command. And we need to, number one, digitalize to understand where people are on that continuum and what they need so that we can optimize and maximize their training.
Doing with 12,000 members of the Canadian Armed Forces who are undertrained and undeployable.
No, they are being trained, Mr. Chair. Sorry, did you want to?
Oh, no, please go ahead.
So they are being trained. They are on the basic training list. So that's what they do.
But they've gone through basic. I want to know how many have gone through basic and are sitting there in furlough waiting to enter their occupations to get the training they need to pursue a career in their trades.
So it depends on every occupation, Mr. Chair.
Well, let's talk about occupation because in the AG's report, and this is something that I think was the most damning part of the report, is on bottom of page 10 when we start talking about the different trades. You guys talked 97 different trades, and that at the time of this study was done, that only 19% of the occupations were going to be completely filled within 4 years or under 4 years. That 30% would take 10 years to fill all the different positions. That 38% was going to take 25 years to fill, and that there was 13% or 13 different occupations on that in that list that we may never reach the authorized level. Conflict and war is not waiting for the Canadian Armed Forces to get their people trained up and ready to go in the fight. 25 years is ridiculous, and 13% never getting it. What type of career paths are we talking here? What trades, what occupations are not being filled from the Auditor General's office first?
I can start. Thank you for the question, Mr. Oh, sorry.
I want the AG
okay.
first, the AG's office first talk about which careers are at risk here.
Thanks for the question. We gave some examples, and I'll highlight a few that are particularly noteworthy for us. Pilot and ammunition technician. We've been talking about the challenges in hiring pilots for many years now. I can think back to our 2018 report on future fighter jets.
And
effectively, if you're buying a fighter jet, but you don't have the people to fly it or maintain it, then that fighter jet is not going to be useful. So these kind of occupations need particular attention. For sure, it takes a long time to train these people, but I think with the needs and the analysis that has been done, the Canadian Armed Forces can take the information and improve.
Okay, so, you know, you guys, this morning, Minister, out doing damage control, talked about that now that out of the 97 trades, that 70 of them have been addressed. Is that addressed as of today, or is it still saying, no, we got the number down, that we're going to fill those in the next 5, 10, 25 years?
Mr. Chair, the minister's comment on the 70% of our trades that we met our strategic intake goals for this year. So, for example,
Not actually trades that are currently trained up and deployable.
That's correct, Mr. Chair, but those goals are set with a view to recover the trades and to making sure that they become healthy again.
So it's schematics and how he's addressing that. So out of the 97, there's still 27 that aren't being addressed. What trades are we at a critical point, and when are we going to get people to actually fill those roles?
Well, some are on the, Mr. Chair, on that page 11, as the AG mentioned.
But is that changed?
It's SIG operator, I recognize. I don't see maritime technician on there, but that's certainly one that we're tracking closely. Weapons tech, there are some in the Army, Navy, Air Force. The training capacity is what's limiting us because we do have pools of applicants. The difference between 70% of our objective met in all the occupations and 100% is less than 250 applicants being sent to the right occupation. So we're on a clear recovery path. We will be at 71,500 on the reg force because that's what you're alluding to. By 2029, it will take some more time to finish, probably depending on the occupations they're into, to train them, to train effective strength, train status. But we're getting there.
What about on the reserve force side?
Reserve, same thing. We grew the reserve this year, Mr. Chair, by 1,500. We are, as we speak, I'm getting messy with my notes, 25,054 average pay strength of an objective of 30,000 by 2029.
Okay, and recruitment there is happening at the unit level more so than the general intake we do for Reg Force?
It's actually, I'm good. It's actually both. We do reserve recruiting at our recruiting centers, as well as the Army, Navy, Air Force. Mostly Navy and Army, they do it at the unit level.
With your recruiting centers, are we getting more of our members out into the community rather than just sit behind a desk in an office?
Our objective is to have our forces in operations domestically and abroad, of course, and then there are some really essential positions kind of in an office as well.
Okay, because, but I'm just saying that at the recruiting office, often they're at the office and not in the community. Okay. Are we getting them out to trade fairs? Are we getting them out to job fairs at high schools and universities? Are we doing more to in communities like our First Nations and others that we're trying to attract? Are we putting people where the saying we always use out in the Interlake is go hunt where the ducks are. So let's get our troops out into the field where we can talk one-on-one directly to them other than just those that want to come through the front door.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll allow an answer, Ms. Fox. Go ahead, please. But yes,
I'll be very quick and just completely agree in terms of community presence. And I would say especially important in the Arctic. As we expand our investments, as we do more, we need to make sure that we recruit and that we have community engagement about our plans. Thank you.
Could I have just one final question?
Yes. Yeah.
So one of the critical shortages are in pilots and aircraft technicians. Right now, fighter pilots, we've outsourced that to other countries to do our training. When are we going to repatriate that and have that sovereign capability at home?
That is absolutely something that is being considered, and hopefully we'll have more to say on that, but I think that is one of the very important elements of sovereignty and repatriation of the training here.
Thank you. I'm going to just, I'll go to Ms. Yip in 1 second. Just for a point of clarification and to contrast, General, would it be possible to get the list of trades where there's still a deficiency? If we could look to get the next couple
Mr.
weeks.
Chair, I
in.
can certainly
Yeah.
be on notice to provide the list of the 21 trades that are we call the critical occupations.
Thank you. I didn't think that would be controversial. So if you could do that, please, we'll look for that next couple of weeks. Thank you very much. Ms. Yip, you have the floor. I will certainly give you extra time if you need it. I gave Mr. Bazan time as well. So it's theirs if you want it. You have certainly 5 minutes, but if you run long, that's no problem.
Okay, thank you very much. This is in regards to some of the changes made to the recruitment process. We've talked about the Canadian Forces Aptitude Test. Was the scored employment application form, was that to replace the aptitude test to show perhaps different skills?
The scored applicant, it's a survey base that was in lieu of, it was to replace the Canadian Forces Aptitude Test that was perceived to be a barrier at the entry. So instead, we gauged the applicants using a survey base. It's not perfect. It's doing the job, and this is why we want to evolve towards a Raven and potentially another type of cognitive test. It was a pilot. It still is, and we find that we need better tools, and we're going to allow ourselves to have those tools shortly.
Exactly are you trying to capture in this application form? Would it be just as intimidating as the aptitude test, or is it looking at different skill sets for applicants?
So for having done the CFAT myself, I remember that it's pretty intense, it's time-based, and you need to do a whole bunch of actions, and you're rushed through it, whereas the CF is the scored application is more of a survey base that you do on your own time. You provide the information that allows us to derive the necessary conclusion on who you are, and for example, there are questions on your diplomas, what you own, so we can build the persona that you are, build on the information you're surrendering to us at a much slower pace. So it's not perceived. We've seen really good comments about it, but we still need to run a selection process. So we need to grant ourselves and enable ourselves with more of a screening tool that wouldn't be perceived as a barrier at the entry. And this is the balance that we need to have. That's why I don't have the solution as we speak. We're studying this or the way forward.
Why was a probationary period introduced? Why wasn't that there before?
Again, Mr. Chair, it's all part of reducing barriers, but upholding standards. So, on one hand, we want to ease the access to the Canadian Armed Forces. That comes with potential risk, and when the risk materializes, it's not if, it's always when. We needed to have the enabling ourselves, giving ourselves the tools to exfil them when they were not meeting 3 conditions: medical, security, or conduct.
Are you able to see the impact of these changes yet in the recruitment process?
Mr. Chair, I think the numbers talk by themselves. We've grown over the last 2 years implementing all those new initiatives. We've grown the regular forces by close to 5,000. We're at close to 68,000 of 71.5, so we're just 3,600 short of the target, and we're in 2026. So I think it is. We're making great progress. I'm cautiously optimistic about reaching the target. There's no other choice. I would tell you, is by all means necessary. We made it number 1 priority for the department. So this is why it's fully resourced, fully staffed, that we have the L0, what we call the L0, the strategic level attention on this. This is why we have a DM so versed on CAF recruiting business, which 5 years ago, I'm not sure it would have been the case because it was not the priority of the department.
Okay. Despite prioritizing qualified women during the recruitment process, why does the representation of women remain below the goals? And you can see that in Exhibit 8 of the report, of the Auditor General's report.
We thank you for that question. We onboarded 17.2% this fiscal year, this past year. It's not enough to reach our target of 25%. We should be more recruiting in a 30% zone. We're having great difficulties because the bulk of our occupations and positions that we have to offer to Canadian population is in the combat arms, in the Army, and then more specifically in the combat arms. So until we can convince women to join the Army and then the combat arms, I'm very pessimistic about meeting the 25% target. So therefore, we're applying a lot of energy to send our combat arms women. Like our Chief of Defense Staff is one of them. She's a great champion about and a showcase of what women in the combat arms can be. And I'm sending them, especially if bilingual, to recruiting centers as a matter of priority so that they can tell the story and attract other women like them to join.
Okay. What about the cost of living concerns that some of these recruits may have? I know that compensation has increased, but also sometimes it's not just about compensation, but it's about where they live, the families that they bring. How are you addressing this at the recruitment stage?
So I think as we recruit more members, it is important for us to think about what makes the experience positive and the totality of the effort that is required to attract and retain. And that is definitely as part of salary and incentives, whether it be for some of the critical occupations that we spoke about and incentivizing people into where we have need. But it's also the broader supports that are put in place. It's setting up the right culture so people feel like they want to join and want to stay. It's investing in things like childcare to make it realistic for people. So the $100 million complement systems across the country in order to deliver that childcare. It is about housing and allowances, if people are serving internationally. So what we try to do is look at the totality of the system and make the investments appropriately to make sure that we can retain that talent.
Are there any other further comments that you would like to include before we finish?
I would just thank my colleagues here at the table because they've done such great work to improve the process. They are dedicated to getting the skilled workforce we need, and they've gone through a lot, of personal effort to drive this, and I think that's why we're here today.
Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, we appreciate the work from the Office of the Auditor General, Mr. Hayes, your entire team. So thank you for always being ready to come in and being here today as well. I want to thank our witnesses for coming in for testimony and participation in relation to the report on recruiting for Canada's military of the 2025 fall reports of the Auditor General of Canada. I'm just going to dismiss this meeting, dismiss the witnesses, that is, suspend the meeting just for 2 or 3 minutes. We still have other items on the docket, so don't go far, and I will endeavor to get things back on track as quickly as possible. This meeting is suspended. Thank you for coming in. I'm going to bring this meeting back into order. We are now in camera. I'm going to ask. No, we're still in camera, so folks do not leave. Sorry, we are still in public. Pardon me. So we are good with people lingering. I'd like to deal with a motion that I understand has broad consensus. If that's the case, we will move on it. And if I discover that's not the case, I will move to close this part of the meeting. Monsieur Lemire, vous avez une motion que vous aimeriez.
Mr. Lemire, you have a motion that you would like to present. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. On April 15th, we had a very interesting meeting on the main estimates and the Auditor General, and she made a recommendation to reassure her unrestricted access to information based on the section 14.1 in Nova Scotia, an act respecting the Office of the Auditor General. We attach that to the request. Essentially, it provides unrestricted access at all times to documents from all organizations subject to audit, and it can be any auditable entity, including the right, and that is to provide documents to the Auditor General concerning its duties, activities, organization, and methods of operation. It seems absolutely necessary to me. It could be modernized in the Act, and there's an opportunity next week to do so with the budget update that we are waiting for. So the motion is the following: that in light of the testimony of the Office of the Auditor General on the 2026-2027 main estimates of April 15, 2026, the Standing Committee on Public Accounts report to Parliament on the need to modernize Section 13 of the Auditor General Act to ensure unrestricted access to information. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
I have two friendly changes. C'est pas au Parlement qu'on va
This report won't be tabled in Parliament, but to the House of Commons.
To House Commons, not Parliament. Easy one, je pense. Puis, and finally, I'm going to suggest we suggest is attached and en français qu'on enlève.
And that in French we remove attached in appendix.
L'exemple représente. Ou pardon, représente.
Oh, sorry. Represents suitable wording.
Suitable wording. So we don't need an annex. That we don't really attach annexes to motions. So that's just housekeeping wording, which I don't think will be a problem. Ça marche, OK, très bien.
Tout à fait, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Ms. Tesser-Dirksen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to my colleague for presenting this motion. I do have, and it's not even so much a question as a comment that I'd like to get on the record about concerns around potential chilling effects that officials might have in seeking candid legal advice. So I know whenever we're talking about giving different officials expanded powers to access information, particularly information that might be protected by solicitor-client privilege, there might be a concern that folks who need to access that advice from lawyers may have that advice exposed to scrutiny. So just a comment. I don't know if my colleague wants to comment on that or if he's been able to ask about it or gotten any reassurances about it.
Ben, pour moi, l'enjeu, il est simple.
Well, for me, the issue is simple and clear. It's a request that comes from the Auditor General herself to be more effective in her work. We heard her talk about challenges in a number of Crown corporations, and I think that we are at a juncture where we need to have this. The mandate can be done through a legislative amendment, and the opportunity is short. We're not reviewing the entire act, but simply giving this provision. And perhaps next week, the budget update could be a good opportunity. I am convinced that this work that you are asking for needs to be done rigorously, and I'm convinced that governments must have this data, and it's an opportunity to act. It is our committee's responsibility to act in the greater good on budgetary spending made by the Canadian government. And so we need to give this power to the Office of the Auditor General. In my opinion, the government already has that data. If not, perhaps there's something concerning that means that this is even more warranted.
We should tell.
Yes, Mr. Deltel. Yes, to come back to the question, which is quite relevant, there are two things to be taken into account. First of all, the motion was tabled in due form, respecting the 48 hours that we need to submit when we study a motion. And why 48 hours? It is to give the necessary time to conduct diligent verifications, and I understand that when we're in government, I would imagine you need to check and double check to ensure that there are no precedents that could have consequences. But as I said, 48 hours were respected, so it's not new. It hasn't just fallen into your laps. So you had the time to conduct this check. And secondly, as my colleague said so well, the Auditor General is asking for this. She knows how this works. If she does so, it's because she has to check the legitimacy. And secondly, there's already a province who's doing this in Nova Scotia. So you have three things that mean that, in my opinion, we could vote today on this. And that is what I hope that you will do. Thank you.
Any comments? Yes, Mr. Osborne.
Thank you. Just one, and we're not going to rock the boat on this. We're amenable to the motion that Mr. Lemire put forward. We do have what we believe is a friendly amendment. If it's acceptable, we'll move forward. If parties don't want to accept it, then we'll move forward without it. We believe that this is a friendly amendment, but we don't intend to hold this up. We had some discussion prior to this discussion. I'll just read in the amendment, and if all parties feel that this is acceptable, fine. If not, we'll go without it. That in light of the testimony of the Office of the Auditor General on the 2026-2027 main estimates of April 15th, 2026, the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, and this is the change, writes the Treasury Board Secretariat, end of change, on the need to modernize Section 13 of the Auditor General Act to ensure unrestricted access to information, and adding the other change, and that the Treasury Board Secretariat respond back to this committee in 90 days, end of change.
I think instead of reporting to the House.
Yes.
Okay. Monsieur Lemire, alors c'est une question d'écrire une lettre.
Mr. Lemire, it's a matter of writing a letter to the Treasury Board for a response within 90 days instead of sending to the House of Commons. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think given the fact that it's asked for by the Auditor General, it's a concrete measure that can lead to fast action, notably the opportunity given by next week. I'm worried that integrating this aspect would mean that we would lose this window of opportunity, and that we would not respond to the answer. I think the information is very relevant, and I think that the government is able to take this initiative and to give us this information without it being integrated into the motion, since that could slow down and we could miss our window of opportunity, which is only open until next week.
Ball is in your court. I'll make a suggestion if it's friendly. Why don't we do both? That I'll table it. I think Mr. Lemire's concern is to get this in front of the government before the fiscal update is done. So I kind of see his point there, where Gergel actually is looking for an answer from the government, which I think this committee would welcome. Why don't we do both? Why don't I table it friendly in the House, from the House or from the Public Accounts Committee, and reference a letter we're writing to the Treasury Board seeking an answer in 90 days. I think that kind of covers it all. Would that work? Okay. Mr. Osborne, it was really a question for you. So.
I think we'll be good with that. Yes. Okay.
Then, to move things along, I'm going to I'll look for unanimous consent just to wrap all that up. That we agree to add Mr. Osborne's amendment as an addition to reporting to the House, seeking a response from the government in 90 days. Treasury Board. Thank you. All right, that's passed. Good. I'm now going to suspend again for 5 minutes. We're going to come back here in camera, but my goal is to keep you here as briefly as possible. This meeting is suspended. We'll see you back in 5 minutes.